Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this session, which is just one of many in today's Integrated Marketing Virtual Conference for Nonprofits, brought to you by the Integrated Marketing Advisory Board. Before we get started, we want to take a moment to thank our conference sponsor, Give Together, for helping us bring this conference to you at no charge. We also want to thank our media sponsor, the Nonprofit Times, for helping us get the word out about this unique conference and for providing feedback on conference session and content. We'd also like to thank Grizzard for sponsoring this session. During this session, please feel free to submit questions in the chat box in your GoToWebinar window. And the session's presenter, Jeff Hardy, will answer questions toward the end of this window. So with that, I turn it over to you, Jeff.
Hey, thanks so much. Hi, I'm Jeff Handy, and I'm Senior VP of Direct Marketing and Donor Care for the Humane Society of the United States. And a good way of describing my role here is that I oversee all the direct response channels, so mail, TV, online, and telemarketing. And I also oversee our inbound donor care function. As he mentioned, feel free to ask any questions by typing them into the chat window, as shown here. I want to lead off today by a quote that from something that was posted to our Facebook page a couple years ago. And this quote, to me, summarizes quite nicely how things have changed in the last 15 years, and why the concept of integrating mission and fundraising across a boatload of media didn't even cross our minds a decade ago. So a decade ago, we raised money through the phone and the mail. PR coverage was about getting our name placed in newspapers favorably. And when the web first came around, websites were essentially online brochures for our organizations. And today, the lines, of course, are blurred. And these fuzzy lines, for us, they create challenges and opportunities. And I think this is the case for all nonprofits. So I want to spend today giving you a case study of how we've managed these changes over the past decade and into today to drive both our mission and our revenue, because for us, they really are intertwined. How do we decide what channels to invest in? How do we combine the importance of messaging for our mission with the revenue with the imperative to raise revenue? And how does staff involved in these areas interact? How do we organize our stuff? How do we manage conflict across channels? These are things we deal with every day here at HSUS. And I hope to answer those questions for you today. Before I dive in, I want to tell you a little bit more about the HSUS. We are the nation's largest animal charity, and our mission is eliminating animal cruelty from a wide variety of industries. So you've probably heard of a lot of our campaigns. One of them, for example, is our campaign to end the commercial slaughter of seals, which takes place each spring off the east coast of Canada. We want to eliminate the mass commercial dog breeding operations known as puppy mills, and some of the worst abuses of factory farms, and the use of chimps in medical research, and many other campaigns. And our tactics include undercover investigations, campaigns that seek to pass specific pieces of legislation or persuade a company to adopt a more humane practice, lawsuits, and of course public education campaigns. I do have a couple of disclaimers. First of all, we are an animal charity, and as such, we actually have an incredibly rich visual to work with, and those are animals. We have incredible stories and imagery around which to base our messaging. The other thing is that we actually are an advocacy organization, and so particularly in the online and new media space, advocacy, as you'll hear about repeatedly over the next hour, provides us a lot of opportunity to get out messaging while also recruiting more potential donors to our work. I want to give you some highlights about the evolution of our direct response here. And before 2004, our entire fundraising operation was based on a premium-driven direct mail program combined with telemarketing. So we acquire donors through the mail, convert them into second-time donors through the mail, and into monthly sustainers via the phone. Our online program was established in 2004, and I'll talk about the dual goal program in just a minute. We put our toe in the water on television in 2009. And then last year, we launched a new direct mail program specifically for our online acquired advocates and donors, and that's still very much a work in progress. Our core approach, this is particularly true online, is based on fundamental constituent relationship management, or CRM. So we acquire the donor or advocate, we involve them in our mission, we convert them into a donor, and then we seek to retain them into a donor. So in practice, what we're doing is recruiting advocates via what we call serial campaigns. So I mentioned at the outset our seal campaign, our public mail campaign, et cetera. And if you imagine a calendar for us, it's really a series of overlapping hills where a campaign goes from a relatively dormant phase into a higher phase. We sustain that over a period of time, and then it lowers down, and the next hill overlaps it and starts up. And so if you're a member of our file, you will see this. So our seal campaign, which is tied to the start of the commercial hunt in late March and early April each year, will begin in mid-February and take us into mid-April. And during those periods of time, and I'll cover how we do this, we actually, keep the focus on that campaign while obviously serving, news events and other campaigns that the organization is running at the same time. But we try and concentrate that activity around these core campaigns. And as I'll talk about repeatedly, our campaigns are integrated across all media. And again, last year was the first year we really introduced the mail. So we typically begin a relationship with one of our prospective donors around an issue or a program. And then through a variety of tactics, we convert them into a donor. And one of our core strategic underpinnings is that advocates will donate and donate again. For us, particularly the new media channels, mission and fundraising are truly integrated. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how we've adapted to this landscape and what's happening. And I used to tell a story about a woman in Michigan. And this is a true story. It was the late 1990s, and this woman had lived a perfectly normal Midwestern life for 60-some-odd years. And then through no fault of her own, things began to change. And this all related to this woman's name. It started off slowly for her. She'd call to make a doctor's appointment, give her name, and she'd get a pause or maybe a comment about it. And as time wore on through the late 1990s, it got to the point where anytime she gave her name, it would be a conversation starter. People would laugh and say, "Are you serious?" And you understand this poor woman's predicament when I tell you her name. It was .com. And I believe it was spelled, this is a true story, I believe it was spelled K-A-H-M. But .com, when she said .com, obviously, through no fault of her own, she became one of the first casualties of what has become an explosion of new media since the late 1990s. Before this explosion of media, as I mentioned earlier, the old days were pretty easy. Direct mail and telemarketing, for us, they were apart from PR, apart from mission, apart from everything we did. We had the money people raising money in the corner, and there really was no need to integrate. And about 10 years ago, email came along, and I know all of us as organizations have had a various evolution in email, but for us it took off relatively quickly. And we literally used to send out email blasts, the same email to the entire file when our email started, and it was quite effective. So fast forward to 10 years, and we're dealing with a true explosion of media. These are all new ways to engage our supporters and for them to engage with us. And so our challenge is most of these ways are not direct response mediums. They're great ways of engaging people. They're great ways of getting our mission out there. But it's very hard to raise money on Facebook or Twitter. So we constantly ask questions, I'm sure all of you do. What is the role of Twitter? Is it PR? Can it raise money? Should we be on Instagram or Pinterest? And if so, what is unique about those media that ties nicely into our program? Are there ways we can actually make those media work for us, and how? Do online video ads on YouTube, for example, raise money? Can we make them work? We do video very well here at HSUS, but can we actually raise money through video, through YouTube ads? What is the payoff for both mission and fundraising in all of these channels? We just don't know. I want to give you a few examples of how quickly our marketing universe has evolved. When we first started our online program, it was oriented almost primarily toward getting the email address. It still is largely that way today. But we used to exclude everything just to get the email address. In fact, our standard fields were first name, email address, and zip code, because we've always done a lot of geo-targeting in our email program. Now, of course, we ask for phone numbers. In fact, not one in most cases, but two. So we want a landline for telemarketing, and we want the mobile phone for our text alerts. And this is standard for us now across most of what we do. We used to ask people to take an online action and then tell a friend via email. When that friend took the action, we gave them an opportunity to opt into our file, and that's how we organically grew our email list. Now, we ask people to take action, then share, again, to meet the needs of our constituents who are on Facebook, they're on Twitter. They're not just emailers anymore. This obviously has a huge impact on our direct response. And I'll tell you later about how we actually get around this. Oftentimes today, we even allow people to share before taking the action we want them to do. So this is actually an appeal, a year-end appeal for us. And you can see our share links, which are standard on every email we send out, are up there on the upper right. For me, a direct response fundraiser, I had to be persuaded long and hard to accept this on our emails. But it's now become standard practice here because, again, our constituents demand this. And we used to build our content on compelling stories. We tell a story, we convey emotion in that story, and we ask people to support us. And today, same thing. The actual content of fundraising and mission is the same. That's the one thing that hasn't changed. We just have more places to tell our story. So today it's fairly common for us to get comments about a direct mail on Facebook. This is one of the positive ones. We have a lot of not so positive ones, people who don't like our free gifts. This is about our TV ad. And our TV ads actually offer a back-end premium for a monthly donation. And this was feedback from someone saying, why are you doing that? Money is precious to the economy and don't waste it. You can see our response there. This is an example from Twitter. So the bottom line is our constituents are here. They're really everywhere. In addition to the simple customer service benefits of engaging them on these channels, we think all the time about how to optimize these channels to raise funds and help us achieve our mission. So about 5 years ago, Convio Edge Research and Seed Change Strategies put out a study. It's really a seminal study called The Next Generation of American Giving. And this quote is from that study. And bear in mind, this research was done in 2009. So we're approaching about 5 years of time elapsed since this came. We've embraced this tactic. We live and breathe it here at HSUS. And Blackbaud and the other two organizations actually updated that study last year and reissued it in August of 2013. And these are two quotes that I pulled from that study. And we really are living in a multi-channel world. And our constituents are really at the center of this world. And while all generations are multi-channel in their communications habits, the ideal mix does actually vary from generation to generation. So I'd like to walk you through now what we are doing at the Humane Society of the U.S. to adapt to this world. And I really have identified 4 key ingredients for us that offer a really good framework for describing how we manage our way around this increasingly complex environment. The first, and really the most important, is goal agreement. The second is we coordinate our actions across all channels. The only real exception to the channels are our TV campaigns and our premium mail program. Those are the only two, although they're far more integrated than they used to be, in which we don't daily coordinate across channels, given those the unique aspects of those two channels for us in fundraising. We evaluate emerging media and invest based on financial return on investment. So we literally asked ourselves a few years ago, can we make money on Facebook? And we actually succeeded in getting a staff person with the goal of that staff person paying for herself, so her salary and her benefits, within 12 months' time, and we actually did it. And then finally, we seek to maximize response across all channels. I'm going to cover each of these in depth over the remaining time we have together today. The first is this concept of goal agreement. When we launched our program back in 2004, the idea of asking advocates to donate money online was like heresy around here. I remember selling this concept, which by the way got from Pro-Choice America, that advocates will donate and donors will take action. And when I first proposed that we do this at HSUS, the response I got from our campaigners and our government affairs folks was, oh gosh, but our advocates actually care about animals. You can't ask them for money. You know, fundraising was other. It was on the other side of the building. And we never actually had to confront this as an organization. So today, that debate almost looks quaint. But at the time, this was a key part of establishing the program. You know, if we couldn't ask our advocates to donate, we couldn't actually integrate mission and fundraising in any meaningful way. So in my experience here, goal agreement really does transcend organizational structure. I'll give you an org chart. It's a bit messy. I'll give it to you in a few minutes. But you know, I would think on balance, if you only do one of getting agreement on goals or reorganizing your organization to be more adaptive of new technologies, I would say a goal agreement is critical. So our new, particularly a new online team, are just drilled into our goals of advocacy and fundraising. I think engagement and education are dirty words. And if you're not getting someone to take some action through an interaction, you're wasting your time. Engagement has no value unless you can demonstrate that such engagement leads to direct actions. And we live and breathe that here at HSUS. And it goes without saying that we have to remind ourselves of this constantly. Because inevitably what happens is if you don't do it, the goal agreement begins to slip. And then you have people posting web stories online that don't actually lead to either one of these options. If you look at our file of all online donors, 62% have taken at least one action. And if you eliminate crisis donors from the mix, so these are donors that we recruit when we're responding to Hurricane Sandy and other disasters, that number increases to 85%. Our second key ingredient is this concept of coordinating actions across channels. What this means is that if we're running our SEAL campaign, we want the same ask to take place across every other channel. So let me give you an example of how this works in practice. These are screenshots all taken from one day about a year and a half ago. This was a part of our cruelty-free campaign. And you can see our email, which we call Humane Action internally, went out. And the main slot there was a little quiz about animal testing. And this, by the way, was nearly a full file email. This was our action. Simple online petition, which remains a wonderful way of increasing your email file. This is our homepage. We had a B-level celebrity, maybe C-level, working with us in the campaign. And you can see we actually will feed in our content from Twitter and Facebook right there on the homepage. This was how it looked on Facebook itself. This was the actual pledge within Facebook. And this is done through an API provided by Convio. This is a blog that our CEO publishes nearly every workday. We cover the same topic. So if you join our email file and pay attention to us online, you will see this kind of execution is pretty much a daily reality at HSUS. So how do we do it? One of the key ingredients to us, beyond the goal agreement I mentioned at the outset, is a meeting we call the nooner. It's a daily 9-minute meeting. Our goal is to be done in 9 minutes. Most of us stand. And when there's a disaster, such as Hurricane Sandy or a big news crisis, we will actually schedule this, usually at 10 a.m. on both Saturday and Sunday. But typically, it's every day at noon sharp. All the major channels are represented. So PR, web, email, social, the blog, our donor care function, our mail function. They're all there every day. It's required that at least someone from each channel be there every day. We launched this meeting about 3 years ago, and it's now become really a part of the culture of the organization to the point where if you're one of our program or campaign staff and you're launching a campaign, say we have an undercover investigation and we're ready to release it, they know to come to the noon meeting to give a briefing on this campaign. During those times, we're never done in 9 minutes, but the meeting provides a daily, previously scheduled forum for campaigns to come and brief us. Another good example is we have an animal rescue team that assists local shelters and law enforcement agencies with rescues of animals from animal fighting operations, animal hoarders, puppy mills, and the like. And when we have a new rescue, the rescue team will send a rep to kind of brief us on, this is where it's going to be, this is what's going to happen, these are our shelter partners. So our PR folks can reach out to the local media in the state and region where this is taking place. Our online team across every channel can actually produce content related. We'll actually decide, are we going to do an appeal on this or not? And so on and so forth. We cover the timing, the actions, the obstacles, and we outline them and address them. And quite often we'll spawn smaller meetings that will follow the noon or be scheduled separately. But this is a very, very efficient way of getting your communications channels on the same page, particularly where mission and fundraising intersect. And I've been preaching this meeting for about a couple years now, and I'm always gratified when people come back to me and say, hey, we started it. For us it's at 9 a.m. We like to do it in the morning. But it's been fantastic. And another benefit to this meeting is it increases unity and people get to know each other. It's usually pretty high energy. And so if you're not doing this in the organization, I encourage you to try it. For us, we're a very news-driven organization. So we have a lot of fodder, and we have to make a lot of hard decisions about what to cover and when. Which leads me to what happens when there's conflict. There's conflict all the time. In fact, my personal philosophy is that you can't create excellence without it. So the real key is, how do you manage it? So the first thing we do is schedule around it whenever possible. So this is particularly true for email. So if we have an email appeal plan for a certain week, and the week before on Thursday, we get word that USDA is going to release a ruling on chimps in research. We'll actually say, well, can we move that appeal? Can we reschedule it? Can we actually, move it, adjust our schedule to take advantage of the fact that we have a pretty big news story. We think it gets picked up, and we need to like hop on top of that with all of our other media. So we're able to schedule our way around it quite a bit. When we're not, we ask ourselves, can we segment around it? And what this means is, can we actually split our file? And this can be 2 ways, 5 ways, 10 ways. Can we split our file so that the people for whom this story is relevant will hear about this story, but the folks for whom a different story or different action is more relevant, they'll hear about something different. And our email file continues to become more and more highly segmented. We actually segment on Facebook quite a bit. You can actually segment your posts on, as many of you know, on many factors such as geography. So we will actually segment our file. Now internally, what happens is the campaign team, they'll be disappointed when they'll find that the entire organization won't hear about their issue. But I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule, and we always assure them that you're going to get 80% of the actions. We're going to get 80% of the donations if we hit this population. And with this message, you're not going to lose a lot because we segment based on characteristics of our file, where they live, whether they're a donor or non-donor, their issue interests, their past actions, etc. Another thing we do here is proactively communicate our fundraising campaigns. The classic example is year-end. So we actually will tell our campaign and program teams that in December, you're going to have a tough time getting visibility for your programs. So anything you can do to schedule your way around, around December, you're going to do that. The SEAL campaign is another great example. During the SEAL campaign, that's front and center on our homepage, on social media, in the mail. And if you're planning to release your undercover investigation the last week of March, you're just not going to get the coverage that you normally would. So this has been a cultural evolution over time. It's working quite well for us overall. This really helps clear the decks. Sometimes, though, none of the three options are possible. Something will land on December 10th, of course, right in the middle of fundraising that we have to hop on. And when there's a conflict that we can't schedule around, segment around, or proactively communicate around, we kick it up to one of our executive VPs, and he makes the call. And our standard procedure is advocacy comes first. We'll push the fundraising campaign if we need to. So sometimes, it's pretty rare, it happens maybe once or twice a year, we have to just make the call that we have to literally cancel an entire appeal or appeal sequence for something that's breaking. So how are we organized? So I freely admit this is a little bit screwy. The fundraising track is on the left side. The communications track is on the right side. And I'm essentially the head of direct marketing and donor care. So that little second box on the left is me. And you can see the channels I oversee are all the ones I mentioned at the outset of today's webinar, save one, and that's online. You see online, which we define as all the things there in parentheses, is under communications. And this is the case because of that dual advocacy fundraising goal that our online and new media channels have. So all those channels aren't just about fundraising. We invest in them based on fundraising. We grow them based on a financial ROI. But they are in communications because advocacy is what drives the bus. It's our mission. So as you can see, we have an inherent and built-in conflict we have to work around. So we put in place two things to help online and the other channels operate more in sync. One is this concept of budgetary authority. So I have a primary role in putting together the budget for online communications each year. So if we have a new initiative to raise X dollars through some initiative, I'm often the architect, and I bring in the online team as necessary to help flesh out the concept. And that online team is going to be executing that. The second thing we've done is created a new position that reports to me called the Director of Integrated Marketing. And you can see those dotted lines. She is kind of the nucleus of the operation. So one good example is that we actually will telemarket our online acquired names. And we have a person on staff who actually runs all of our telemarketing. So whether you're acquired by mail, online, or by TV, the expertise of this individual will actually, she has the relationships with the call centers we use. She's got the best practices down pat. So she actually will manage the telemarketing program, but the Director of Integrated Marketing role is the go-between between those two functions. So again, it's a bit messy, and it's a continued evolution. but this is where we are. I have heard other organizations have a lot of success with, they put one person at the top through which fundraising and communications both report. And I think that is a very effective strategy, even though we currently are not doing that here. I want to give a mini case study about how this worked in practice during our recent year-end fundraising campaign. Our fundraising campaign was first started in 2009. It was the current iteration of our campaign was created in 2009, and we actually used a case study that M&R published in Oxfam America, and based on a campaign they ran in 2008. The goal of the campaign is to convert advocates and one-time donors into monthly donors. So we actually run a monthly donor campaign from early December up until the last week of December, after which we pivot to one-time donors. And the campaign features 3 video stories, and these are usually, but not always, they're usually stories of animals that we have rescued from extreme situations or situations of extreme cruelty. So the campaign this last year involved a dachshund that we rescued from a puppy mill in North Carolina named Ricky Bobby. And many of you will get the movie reference. This campaign was really a partnership between the campaign manager, which was one of our online producers in online communications, and a videographer on our video team, which is also part of communications. This campaign, we're now in our 5th year. This campaign has a culture tradition now around it, to the point where when our animal rescue team goes into a puppy mill with our videographer and photographer tailing them, we will actually look for animals that are particularly compelling individuals. In other words, they actually have our year-end campaign in their minds. So it was a videographer who actually, first noticed this dog, and Ricky Bobby was a dog. When we discovered him in his cage, he was literally dragging his hind legs around the concrete, and he had a congenital defect that would have been fixable and there was, if you or I adopted this dog, we would have fixed this problem at a young age, but obviously this puppy mill operator had not done so. So our videographer notified our campaign manager, and this is him here, Jamie. And he and our campaign manager literally traveled to visit Ricky Bobby's new owner, the woman who eventually adopted this dog and fashioned those wheels for him you saw in the previous slide. And the final video was a collaboration between the two. So this campaign obviously is driven by fundraising. Video has advocacy and fundraising as part of its goals, so they're not the only goals. But the outcome was our most successful year-end campaign ever, which is phenomenal. The next key ingredient I want to cover is that we evaluate emerging media and invest based on financial return on investment. And I want to walk you through how we do this. We ask a number of questions about any new media, and this goes for everything from mobile to Pinterest and Instagram, and to big ones like MySpace, which was big in 2006, and Facebook. And we look at the trends, what are the forecasts, and I'm sure all of you do this to some degree, but we actually formally have a process by which we actually evaluate the trends and evaluate them based on what is the prospects for using them to achieve our mission and to raise money. We look what other nonprofits are doing and commercials as well. And then we decide, what can we achieve without additional staff investment? Sometimes we decide to invest. And if so, we ask ourselves, what is the likely payback period? Our traditional measure that we seek is payback in 12 months. although in recent years we've actually been pushing that out more. And then we decide, how do we measure success? So we have I was talking about our noon meeting a little earlier, and you obviously can hear that I'm very high on that meeting. We have another process here that I'm very excited about, and that's called the New Initiatives Budget process. This is part of our annual budgeting process, which starts in May and concludes in August of each year. We do our calendar year as our fiscal year. And this process is open to all staff in program development and communications, in fact, pretty much the entire organization. And the premise of it is that this organization will invest in a new idea if the staffer can get it funded or if the idea will generate revenue. So again, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, our usual payback period is 12 months. So for example, we actually proposed a staff person, this is a number of years ago, to handle our Facebook account. We said, if you let us hire someone to manage Facebook full-time, we think that person can pay for themselves in 12 months. And we did it. In fact, our goal was $100,000, and we raised $107,000 in the first 12 months of this position. HSUS will also budget for programs initially seeded by major donors. So we actually have a newly budgeted program for 2014 that was proposed by a staffer last year who's very passionate about birds. She worked with our major donor team to find a donor who was actually passionate about birds, and this donor agreed to seed the program. So it's a great process, particularly for evaluating what we're talking about today, all these various channels, and actually how we integrate fundraising and mission across those. So I want to give you a mini case study of one of those, and that was mobile. I'm sure mobile is a topic of conversation for all of you, and it needs to be. In 2011, actually late 2010, we had an internal champion. It wasn't me. In fact, I was the one saying, there's no way we're going to pay off for mobile and within 2 years. It's too early. We should wait. We should wait another year. But we had an internal champion who was my boss at the time who wouldn't give up. And so even though we felt fundraising payback period would be longer than 12 months, we said, we really have to start thinking about mobile because everything we're reading is suggesting that it's only going to increase. And this was before the tablet revolution even took off. We also felt mobile presented fairly unique challenges, a much longer learning curve. So the upshot is that we got this position budgeted in 2011 and hired our first full-time mobile manager in March of that year. And people here at the Humane Society know my general approach to advocacy and fundraising, and that if we do something here, we want it to pay off within 12 months. So I don't know if many of you have ever seen that Seinfeld routine where he talks about being in an office environment, and you pass someone in the hallway in the office, and the first time you say, "Hey, Jim, how are you? How's the weather?" Blah blah blah, and then you pass them again later in the day. You're not quite sure what to say. And so Seinfeld's theory was that we should just say acknowledge. So the second and third and fourth time we pass someone in the office, we say acknowledge, acknowledge, and you walk on. So every time I would see Lara, our new mobile communications manager, I would ask her, I said, "Have you paid for yourself yet?" And I think I was rather merciless with my teases to the point where she was like, "Jeff, stop being a prick." I think I was really, I would just ride her. I said, "Have you paid for yourself yet?" And for me, it was totally teasing because I did not expect mobile to pay for itself anytime soon. So 9 months into her job, literally the last week of December 2011, she comes marching into my office, leans over my desk to get in my face and says, "I'm officially paid for." So, mobile actually has come to us that rapidly that within 9 months of hiring a manager, she actually paid for her salary and benefits. And now, 3 years into it, I think we all know the mobile revolution and what it's meant to our nonprofits. And you can see the site, the mobile traffic to our website is up to 42% last month. This was a split between phone and tablet. And you can see the growth year over year in the number of end-of-year donations made via mobile. Fully 1 in 10 were made via mobile. And of course, you can see the discrepancy between the percentage of mobile traffic and that percentage of conversion. It's still, even though we spend so much energy and time optimizing our mobile donation forms, it's not the direct response channel that desktops have been yet. And our investment in mobile brought in more than 300,000 in the last 4 months of last year alone. So I use this case study because obviously it's the most successful, but it's that new initiatives budget, that process, and that focus on financial ROI generally that really helps us figure out how to invest and where to invest in these channels. I see the question about measuring return from adding a Facebook person. That's a great question. We actually measured our investment on Facebook. Donations actually made within Facebook. At the time, Facebook Causes was the main vehicle for that. So even though, as I'll mention in a little while, we get a lot of additional measurable benefits from Facebook on fundraising, we actually paid for that investment to direct Facebook-made donations. And again, this is where my disclaimer at the outlet comes into play that animals and social media are a match made in heaven. So the average organization's results will probably certainly vary. The last ingredient I want to talk about is the concept of maximizing response. We raised a decent amount directly through social, but our social still accounts for just 5% of our total online revenue, which itself is less than 20% of our total gross contribution revenue for the organization. So the real value in social media is driving people to other response channels. And for us, fundraising is about maximizing response. It's maximizing given. And so if you're on Facebook or Twitter or any other, or Instagram or Pinterest, simply to engage your supporters, you are not doing enough, in my view, to actually get them to be the advocates and donors you need them to be. So the way around that is what we call driving advocates to response channels. So as my colleague Carrie Lewis often says, success isn't about how many friends you have. You need measurable response. It's, are you getting those people to do what you need them to do to further your mission? So here again is an so another thing is we want to coordinate asks across all of our channels. All right, I'm going back to driving advocacy response channels. I'm sorry about that. So this is an example of an action, the one I mentioned before, on Facebook. And through the Convio API, we actually enable a Facebook friend to actually take an action right within Facebook without even leaving Facebook. We call this driving that Facebook friend to a response channel. In this case, when they complete the pledge, they opt in to receive emails from us. We obviously have the data point that they're interested in testing on animals as a topic, and we'll use that for subsequent segmentation. But we've now taken an email relationship where donations happen, but they're a relatively small part of our pie, and driven them to one of our top response channels, which is email. And last year, in 2013, we got more than 63,000 new email addresses by doing just this. For those of you who do video and are active on YouTube, if you're not annotating your videos, you're not driving them to response channels. You're losing them. So if you go to our videos, you can see we use various what YouTube calls annotation strategies to drive response. And these are areas that are ripe for testing. And the biggest one for me is at the end of a video, making that video clickable to a response channel. So whether you're asking, in this case, this video for a donation or for an action, drive that viewer to take the action you want them to take. You know, we do all this work. I'm amazed. I see nonprofits do all this tremendous work, these tremendous videos. You know, they get me all emotional, and then they leave me hanging at the end because they haven't closed the loop. So I don't have time today to talk about all the individual tactics, but I encourage you to look at these new media. And, you know, YouTube added annotations only a couple years ago. It was something new. So our videographer team started experimenting with the annotations. And it's still an area that I feel that we haven't even fully tested. In other words, what is the best paradigm in which to take a video viewer and move them over to a response channel? The next thing I want to talk about in terms of maximizing response is this concept of coordinating asks across channels. And I know I've touched on this several times already. But coordinating asks across channels means coordinating the timing and the content of something you want to do. I'm a firm believer that channels give lift to each other. So, for example, if you send out a mobile text alert, it's going to drive response online. If you send out a mobile text alert, for those who are on your email file, send the email out the same day, that text alert provides more than 10% lift in the number of people actually taking the action via the closed loop of email. And because we've actually recruited quite a bit of our mobile text subscribers through email, you can imagine the overlap there is pretty significant. I already mentioned the noon meeting, but this is an example of our production calendar, which is basically a calendar and Outlook in which our various channels can schedule different things. And this calendar is incredibly fluid. It's moving almost all the time. You can see this is a snapshot from the last week of December into the first week of January. And you can see we have several affiliate organizations such as the Fund for Animals and Humane Society International that are listed on here. SM is social media. Year-end, the other ones are emails. You can see we have tweets, Facebook posts, and we even have the individual key segments of emails listed here. The entire team has access to this calendar. If we change strategy or change scheduling during the new meeting, this calendar is subsequently updated. And this is a fantastic way for us to manage these integrated messages across channels and be intentional about, well, you know, we got to do this Facebook post today. We're going to do a national post, and our policy is 1 post per day per person on this. So we got to move the Facebook to tomorrow. Should we move the mobile text to tomorrow? Can we hold the email until tomorrow? Can we split up the email into two groups? So these are the questions that we ask as a matter of course. And the noon meeting and this kind of an organizational framework actually serves us quite well for doing that. The last area I want to cover in terms of maximized response is this concept of leveraging data. We as an organization are on a mission to become a truly data-driven organization. I say we have quite a ways to go, but we're getting better all the time, and I hope that you are too. And I'm just going to give you a few examples of what I mean by leveraging data. One of the easy ones is this concept of email segmentation. Our email program continues to grow in sophistication to the point where we now are sending probably 10 to 20 different emails a week to different segments of our file. And here's an example from a couple years ago from one day. If you live in Virginia, you get this email, and you see that main slot there. It says, join us for Humane Lobby Day 2010. This was an event we were trying to drive traffic to in Richmond, Virginia. If you lived in the Chicagoland area, on that same day, this is the email you got. We were doing an event for our End Dogfighting campaign in Chicago. It was a gala, and we sent this to donors in the Chicago area. And we had some other versions, other segments, often tied to geography. That's our biggest segmenting approach is geo-targeting. But if you didn't get one of the segments, you got this. This was the national email. It was an update on horse rescue. And this was actually an email inviting people to watch a video. And this was really a way of cultivating and thanking our file for the work they did to help us help these horses. You can also segment by telemarketing. And as I mentioned before, we actually telemarket donors acquired by a variety of channels. And we've actually tested telemarketing donors and non-donor advocates acquired online with success. And something we started a couple years ago we tested we call it the Clickers program. When someone gets an email from us, a donation appeal, and they open the email, and then they click the link in the email to our donation form, and it may or may not have a video. It often has a video. They then watch the video, and they don't convert. We have that data. It's in Convio, and I think just about every email management program worth its salt will easily provide this data to you. So we had a segment of people who essentially raised their hands. They're interested enough to, A, open your email, and we know that the open rates are hovering around 10 to 15% now. So they opened their email. Not only that, but you've actually persuaded them to click on it, but they didn't make that gift. So we actually identify these people. We call them clickers, and we call them. And it's a huge challenge because when we're running a sustained fundraising campaign, if someone donates to the subsequent email, we then don't want to call them. So we literally do data pulls every morning to get them to our telemarketing vendors so they can call the clickers who haven't yet donated. And we launched this in 2010 for our year-end campaign, and we measure our telemarketing investment in break-even time. So if a segment is breaking even within 12 months, we typically keep the calling program going, and if it drops below that, we'll stop it. But the Clickers program routinely generates a return in 7 months, which is phenomenal for us. And again, these are sustaining giving. And telemarketing into sustaining giving is a remarkably efficient long-term form of fundraising solicitation. Right here again, it's taking information you learn from one channel and using it to segment in a different channel. The third option, and frankly I don't think we're doing enough of this, and that's the concept of social media status segmentation. So if you know that someone's active, say, on Facebook, can you actually serve them something that makes them more likely to take the action that you want them to do? And one example is a photo contest we no longer run, but we used to run. It's called the Spade A Photo Contest. And it was a fundraising contest to raise money for spaying and neutering. And basically the way it worked is you'd upload a photo of your pet with a little write-up, and you ask your friends to vote for your pet, but every vote costs $1. So every vote was basically a donation to spay and neuter. And so what we did was we replicated this contest within Facebook. So you could actually join and participate in this contest entirely on Facebook. And we built a group of people in Convio. We literally called it the Facebookers group. And we built this group by collecting people who clicked on the Facebook share links in our emails. And what we did is we sent an email to this group the day before the entry period contest entry period was over, and said, you can join this entire contest right on Facebook. So it's one example of taking a status of someone that they're active on Facebook in this example, and reaching them through a different channel, a direct response channel, to encourage them to do something you want to do. This was the contest and how it looked within Facebook. That contest, by the way, raised more than $1.4 million for spay neuter during the 4 years we ran it. It was a very successful program for us. And then finally, I want to talk about paid marketing segmentation. This is a slide that Google was kind enough to provide. And this, I think, is really one of the new frontiers in this whole area of adapting to this changing landscape. I think many of you have heard the phrase retargeting. We actually prefer the more consumer-friendly phrase remarketing. But basically, what it means is figuring out who has visited the donation form online or visited your website or got an email, and then giving them related offers through display and search ads as they work their way around the internet. I think all of you know how this actually works. A lot of people think it's kind of creepy, but the actual results are very, very good. And I think for those of you not looking into this, I encourage you to do so. And we're still wrapping our arms around the complexity of this topic. So I want to summarize with just key takeaways. The first is really adapt or die. And more importantly, it's not just about figuring out, hey, should we be on Instagram? It's actually adapting your organizational culture to one of constant evaluation and adaptation. And I mentioned the new initiative budget really for us helps us do it. It's really not enough to do this on an ad hoc basis. Your culture has to realize that, as we talk today, there's going to be something a year from now we probably haven't heard of that we're going to have to think about, should we be doing this or not? Second, goal agreement. It's really hard to change reporting relationships and move staff around. It's a lot easier, at least in my experience, to get goal agreement first across channels, even if that sometimes means cross-functional committees and groups to do it. Third, I mentioned before, is you need conflict. You should be having conversations about what is the goal of our homepage and what should be the mix of fundraising and non-fundraising conflict, or rather fundraising versus non-fundraising content. That conflict is a normal part of our work, and you have to manage it, but you need to embrace it as well. It's not a bad word. Integrated campaigns are efficient. Our advocacy emails and fundraising emails are all produced by the same person. So we literally have one person run the appeals campaign, and she's doing the action alerts and the appeals for that campaign. And it's worked out phenomenally for us. And despite my aversion to words like education and engagement, secondary goals really are valid too, particularly in social media. For example, customer service on Facebook is a key ingredient of what we do there. We have a policy of responding to every donor. Everyone who asks a valid question, we will post a response as quickly as we possibly can. And finally, you want to optimize each channel based on what makes it unique to your constituents. And I'll close with an example of that. This was a tweet from someone, and we were able to actually hook this person up with animal control and save this dog's life. Thank you very much. And what I'll do is try and answer some of the questions in my remaining time with you that you've actually answered me or asked of me. Someone asked, what is the unsubscribe rate from the Facebook petition signers? I don't have that off the top of my head. However, if you email me at ghandy@humanesociety.org, I will connect you with the right person to give you that information. I think I've already asked a question about how we evaluated Facebook revenue. And that was direct gifts within Facebook and Facebook causes. Someone asked about where is the event planner in our organization. We actually do not do a lot of events, but our events team is actually totally separate from both fundraising and communication. We run a couple conferences each year, neither of which is devoted to our main base. One of you asked, when you call the clickers, do you let them know that you're aware that they opened the email? We definitely don't. So for Ricky Bobby, for example, we will acknowledge and reference that Ricky Bobby story, but we obviously don't want to be all big brother and acknowledge that we're calling them because we know we have these data points on them. That's a great question. Another one of you asked, are you able to track conversion from Google Ads back to Convio donations transactions? This is the issue of attribution. And Stephen, this keeps me up at night as well. We are in the middle of trying to wrangle this beast. We have the same issue with DRTV. So obviously, if we serve an ad on Google that's a donation ask, it goes directly to a form that asks for the donation. So 100% of the revenue from that form is tracked back to that investment in the ad. But typically, the ad revenue, unless it's search, which search is terrific for this, but typically the ad revenue from, say, a display ad is not going to pay for the ad from directly sourced. So, but we know that that ad has impact on, for example, email. So, my answer to that question is, and I know this is, perplexing all of us and the commercial sector as well, we're looking at a digital tracking system to try and help make sense of, what is the impact of serving ads, and how does the actual impact translate into revenue across different response channels? That's a great question. If I failed to get to your question, please don't hesitate to email me at ghandy@humanesociety.org. It's GHANDY, and I'll be glad to respond to you privately. Thank you so much for all of your time today.
Awesome. So we've reached the end of our time for this session. We thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Jeff, for sharing your expertise. Please note that if you will be joining us for the next conference session, you'll need to log out of GoToWebinar and log back into the next session. You can also go to our landing page to register for the rest of the day.